everybody. Welcome to this edition of the Dogcast. This is the NADOG Days of Summer. So we're calling the series. This is a bi-weekly event. Quick and dirty webinars. We spend about 30 minutes talking with our guests. We actually have a sponsor on this one as well, and we'll talk to them. If you have questions during these talks, please feel free to jump in and ask away. We've got a Q&A feature there at the bottom of your screen. You can click that, add your question, and we will have a Q&A session at the end as well. Today is June 18th, Tuesday. Tomorrow is Juneteenth, which is why we did a little bit of Juneteenth trivia at the start of this. I am Jim Schild. I'm the founder and head of community at NADOG, and with me is my partner and co-host, Brian Dawson. Brian, you want to say hi?
Yeah, hello. I'm Brian Dawson. I'm Jim's sidekick, a technologist, and a former DevOps evangelist. Glad to be here with you guys.
Cool. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, so Brian as my sidekick, I think that elevates me quite a bit.
Why, thanks.
We do have a John Ruppel here to speak with us about the differences between Agile and DevOps and lots of other things. Really looking forward to a great talk. I got to see John speak at a NADOG event in Raleigh month ago, 2 months ago, not that long ago. I actually have swag from that's not broken yet, so I know it wasn't that long ago. But before we jump into our talk, we do have Digital.ai, who is our sponsor for this edition of the webcast. And we have Encore with us from Digital.ai. Hello, Encore.
Hello.
So we like to do, so this sponsor segment we call LevelUp, and the whole idea behind LevelUp is to give a bite-sized version of some of the leading vendors in this space who are out there. What do they do? What kind of challenges do they solve? All that kind of thing. So if you don't mind, Encore, the first question I want to ask you is just tell everyone at a high level, what does Digital.ai do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jim. So Digital.ai came into existence in 2020. Basically, the venture capitalist TPG, who brought us all together, they saw an opportunity in the market that the first 10 years of this century, 2000 to 2010, we saw a lot of agile adoption, and then between 2010 to 2020, we saw a lot of DevOps adoption, right? Different companies trying to solve specific challenges within the DevOps landscape. The challenge that the venture capitalists saw was still customers were, trying to create their own SDLC pipeline by, getting the best of breed planning solution, which fits their needs, the SCM solution and the CI/CD solution. And they are then kind of building their own, intelligence layers in order to fetch information. So there was a gap in the market where there was no, end-to-end DevOps platform available. So that's how Digital.ai came into existence. What TPG did was they went ahead and acquired, the first, the leaders in the, analyst quadrants in each of the respective domains of Agile and DevOps, so to say. So, we brought together CollabNet version 1 for the planning. We brought, ZBL Labs for the CI/CD. Within the CI/CD pipeline, we needed, security. So we brought in ArcSan. We brought in a testing company called Experitest. And then for the intelligence, we bought a company which had, a data lake solution, very popular in the ServiceNow, problem management and, change management space. It was called Numerify. So we brought that company for the technology, and then we created integrations with all the other domains, over the past few years. So it's kind of a AI-powered, DevSecOps platform.
So thank you, and thank you for that overview there. The next question I have is really about the profile of the person or the group or the challenges that would. So if I'm in software development, or I'm in operations, or I'm a DevOps engineer or whatever, what challenges would I be facing really that would warrant me partnering with Digital.ai?
Yeah, so there are a few different ways, a few different customer profiles that we see with Digital.ai. So as I talked about these 5 different companies, that we brought together, Each one of them had about 150, 200 customers. So we are right now 1,000+ customers company. Each one of them are using one or more than one of our products. When they worked with Collaborate version 1, for example, and ZPL apps, and now they are a Digital AI customer using 2 products. As I talked about the different domains, the customer profile also changes, right? So if it can be a PMO or a Scrum Master using the version 1 solution, or it can be a executive who wants to understand what is going on in the entire planning landscape. So they might have Jira, for example, for their planning, and then they want to understand the enterprise agile planning, and for that they have version 1, right? So that is one type of customer. On the CI/CD side, there could be the DevOps managers, release managers using the CI/CD capability. That is the former ZBL Labs capability that we offer. We also have a very robust offering in the testing space, where we offer about 2,000+ device types in cloud, right? So customers can manage different type of Android devices or iOS devices and do testing on top of them. So that persona would be either a testing manager, a test engineer, or a test lead, or a QA director who wants to understand what is going on in the entire testing. And then on top of that, the data lake solution that I talked about, that you can imagine a CIO looking, wanting to understand the entire portfolio, that what does flow metric look like for my entire organization? What does DORA metrics look like for my organization? So that persona also we cater to. So because we have now a very big, product portfolio, the personas actually change quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like you can cover pretty much the whole SDLC.
Yeah.
Awesome. So assume I am a prospect that kind of fits into that description there. What would be the best way for me to get started with you guys?
Yeah. So for most of our platform, we offer free trials. So the best way to get started would be to getting on our website and getting started with the free trial. That typically also gets you some help from one of our account team personnel. So they would reach out to you and then help you in the use case that you're trying to prove out during that trial. And they can put you in touch with one of our technical experts, our solution engineers as well. I happen to be part of the solution engineering team. I'm the global lead for the DevOps practice at Digital AI. So it would be one of my team members if you're looking at a DevOps use case.
Awesome. Well, cool. Thank you.
So you've been at this about you've been at this about 9-10 years, right? So at this point, when you talk about, you have to have seen all the patterns. So when you talk about deploying DevOps, you're well equipped. Appreciate it. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you, Encore. And thank you, Digital AI, for sponsoring that segment of LevelUp. If you have any links that you can share to Encore, you can put them in the chat here. And then we can also put them in the comments for anyone watching on YouTube.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cool. All right, Brian, I'm going to hand it over to you to take us into the main event here.
All right, great. Well, heading for the main event today with us today, we have John Ruppel from the Catalyst Group. How you doing, John?
Very good. Very good. Glad to be here.
Good. I know we talked a little bit before the show yesterday, and I'm excited to hear a bit about your focus on Agile and DevOps transformation and the human element. But before we get into it, I have a couple of quick questions, and then I'll hand you off to Jim. First of all, just so the audience has a better understanding, at Catalyst Group, what do you guys do, and what is your role there, in particularly how it relates to the connection between Agile and DevOps?
Got it. Okay. So Intelligence Catalyst is the name we came up with. And what we realized is that we're all about accelerating an intelligent change journey. And leaders around, we work with leaders from all around the world. And what we found is that, the change is expensive. Change is hard. Change is whatever you want to put in that blank, fill it in. But that's what we realized is that's the true value that people said, hey, that's, you guys are a little unique. You're not the standard cookie. You're not taking a cookie cutter approach or standard approach to this. You're actually diving in and making us deep. You're challenging us as a leader, as a manager, as a hands-on engineer. You're actually making us really think about the whys along the way. And that's really the key, what we've come to realize about ourselves through the feedback of our clients and customers is that that's what we do. My role specifically is I'm the leadership transformation guide, we call it. And we think of ourselves as guides, Sherpas, helping you climb Mount Everest, because that's really what the clients, when they come to us, they're like, oh my gosh, we got to do this change. It's going to be horrendous. We've heard all these horror stories, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so that's really, my role in this is just to, guide you along, and we're going to talk about some of the philosophies and the approach and what we've come up with, and then so how does this fit in Agile and DevOps and all that stuff? So, and how do we fit into this? So, because of our relationships, we're a little unique in that I've been working with DASA, which is DevOps Agile Skills Association over in Europe. They're the world's leading body of knowledge in Agile and DevOps standards, and I've been helping write those standards and author those standards for several years now. And we have some strategies in place that we're helping leaders around the world incorporate the strategic insight into those standards of why we're writing them the way we are. And then you take another piece of it, becomes the education training part. And that's where I work with different training organizations around the world. DAS has their certifications. IC Agile has their certifications and some other global leading training organizations. So we work with those folks and we help them with their curriculum and content. And then we go hands-on into the field as consultants, as mentors, as coaches, as trainers, whatever you need us to be in the moment. And we work and we make sure that the standards and training that we put out in the classroom, in the, I'll say virtual classroom, or, I don't like using the classroom anymore because it's really your workplace environment is really the classroom today. So it's, in your real world situations, is the standards you're writing, are they going to get results? GSD, get stuff done. And so that's really what our whole approach is about, is we're working with these, thought leaders from around the world and, in Agile and DevOps. And, just for example, I had my Christmas present was Rick Farnhorst and I got to interview Gene Kim 2 days before Christmas.
Nice.
2023. And we're going to get in a little bit more about, his concepts and where he's taken things and his group, him and his team and, his co-authors and stuff. And so, yeah, that's the level that we're talking about, is that we are in the mix with these, with several folks and challenging folks to say, hey, think about things a little differently. And goes back to that whole change. So that's the role we're playing.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I love Gene Kim. And I actually think one of the things that Gene Kim did that was really powerful with the Phoenix project was highlight that organizational performance and then therefore change is often focused on the people and the players. And I like that you say your leadership transformation is where your focus is. I think you'll talk a bit about that, but as we know, we say people, process, tools, right? But I've always said when it comes to tech, always remember that practically anything you're developing has humans on the endpoints on either side. You need humans to build it, and at the end of the day, even if it's embedded code in the engine of your Volkswagen, it's humans that are experiencing it. So, focusing on the people, as you've kind of discussed, I think is important. And so I love that correlation to Gene Kim. Speaking of Gene Kim, there's canned questions that I tend to ask, either DevOps, or I really like to know where people get their information and what can help inform the audience. So to that end, can you share your favorite industry resource? I think I know what it's going to be, but it could be a blog, books, a podcast, but would love if you could share it with us in the audience, your favorite.
It's hard to answer that question because to me, the combination, it's 5. 5 is a transformation number, and it's 5, those 5. But if I had to pick one, which I'm limited to, I'm going to go with Mick Kirsten's Project to Product, and we'll get into more of this. We'll get more into this, a little bit more, and as we go through progress in our conversation here. But that to me was The biggest thing I can, when I work with our clients and work with folks and they say, hey, John, help me out. What can I do? I said, best thing you can do, get in a flow mindset. You and your team, your organization, how can you flow? Just what you talked about, experience at the endpoints with the human experience flow. I'm going to, borrow your words there and combine our two concepts. That's really what it's about, making that human experience flow.
Yeah. Which we pattern, we standardize. I'd say, in trying to deal with my family and kids, I'd say making the human experience flow is no small task. It's valuable, it's important, but it's no small task. You know what? Why don't we, real quick? I know we're running a little bit behind, but can you give it just one more of your top 5? Looks like you snuck one in, maybe. Yeah.
No, the one I'm going to go to is I'm not going to advocate myself or promote myself, but I'm going to go with Marty Kagan's Transformed.
Ooh, I haven't read that.
Yeah, so this is brand new. This is a new one he came out with this year. And the reason why that's so critical is because, to me, I look, if you take Mick Kirsten's high level flow, Marty gives you the nuts and bolts way to build a product operating organism, or the product operating model organization, and how do you infuse the two together, and the nuts and bolts of how to execute that. To me, that's what Marty reveals in this book, and it's new. Honestly, I did a cursory overview just because I had a client that I was working with a couple of weeks ago, and we needed to get a high level run. I haven't really had time to do a deep dive because it's so new, but that's the other one.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Thank you. So just a reminder, it's going to be Mike Kirsten's Project to Product, which is a well-used staple that has impacted people. And then we have Transformed by Marty Kagan. So hopefully we'll be able to get you guys those links. Well, thanks, John. Excited to have you. What I'm going to do, because I'm known to geek out too much, and so Jim, I'm going to step aside. I'm going to let Jim drive a discussion from here. Over to you, Jim.
Awesome.
I feel like I'm coming from the field. Over to you, Jim, out there.
Right, we got Jim on location. Thank you, guys. Yeah, and I'll put links to those books in the comments for the YouTube video there. And speaking of on location, I got to meet you on location, John, in Raleigh a month or so ago, not too long ago. And saw your talk there, and it was awesome, by the way. And this is where I got my favorite swag. This is actually Digital.ai's fidget spinner pin thing that I haven't broken yet. But when you were speaking in Raleigh, I remember one of the things that the audience asked a lot of questions about and got excited about was the high-level formula that you talked about for adopting Agile and DevOps. Can we start the conversation there and just talk a little bit about what that formula is?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. So, and I think it's for the audience to do justice. So the context I'm coming from when I'm speaking is the way I look at when somebody says, hey, what's Agile and DevOps? I say, Agile is the gasoline that runs the DevOps engine. Think of it in that context, because again, I'm going to go into flowing value. And so the formula goes back to, if you look at DASA's website, they have their standards, their 6 core principles. And so really for an organization, if you were to ask and go back even a decade, how are we doing on our Agile and DevOps adoptions or digital transformations? Are we passing or failing? You're going to get a range of 70 to 94% failure rate. It's that bad. And we continue to fail. That's the challenging part, even though we know the path forward. So what we figured out on all this, and where I see a convergence going on in industry, is that you got to start out with a common set of core values that are principle based. And if you look at the stock exchange today, and you take those 6 core values from DASA, all the top performers around the world in the global markets have some derivative, if not those exact standards they're using. Then you get into the next part, which is mix, piece, project to product, where you're flowing value now. What's that customer? Flowing value to that customer. Who is that customer? What does that mean? Now, I'm using ambiguous terms, and that's on purpose because everybody's different. Every organization, every leader is going to be different. And so you guys, the customer, they have to own this, and that's what's different about when I said we'd take a different approach. We as consultants come in, you own it. You own this from soup to nuts, start to finish. That's the key, is that we have our clients own this. They don't give it to us and then we do it for them. and then hand it back. You have to own it. And so that's one of the biggest things we found, because the rate and pace that you can change, going back to the accelerating change journey aspect of it, is the challenges you go through trying to own this is as fast as you can change the organization without breaking it. Yeah. And that's the key thing that we realized. And so the fastest the clients can change and morph and own it and take it on, that's great. So it goes from there. And then this is where Marty's, transform comes in, because that's, the hows. And then if you have a problem or challenge with putting together that, Mick and Marty's combination, that's where this zone to win comes from Jeffrey Moore, one of my favorite authors, Inside the Tornado and the other ones that Crossing the Chasm and all that stuff, right? And then you have Gene Kim, of course, right? And he just had his new book, Wiring, that was brought out. And what's really cool about this is that all these folks were all converging, because it's all about wiring the organization, wiring the people together. It's all about everybody's using some acronyms or some model that's about flow or wiring. It's really cool outside, taking a step back and looking what's going on. And then at the end of that formula is, once you got flowing to the value, flowing value to your customer, you have a product operating model that you're organizing around. Then it comes into the right leadership. And that's where we wrote, Dr. Ken Russell and I wrote our book, is because we realized leaders out there, think about how we got promoted in the last decade. How have we been promoting our leaders in industry? Yeah. And the thing is that that's the key, is that we stumbled upon, is that we realized it's the leadership was one of the biggest missing links. When you talk about why we failed them, everybody says, oh, it's culture, it's culture, it's culture. Yeah. Well, there's two subderivatives of that, right? Yeah. Two things. One is the language that the business people are speaking at the top is not understood or heard by the engineers at the bottom, making where the hands are, hands on, the human, the people making it work. And the development language from the people working and, making it happen, that language is not translated, not heard, or not understood by. So we have a language issue. And that's what I just was talking with a client of ours last week. I got to fly into my home state of Michigan and do a workshop there. And it's really cool is that we talked about it. It's all about doing that translation mechanism. How do you get the business language and the development language? How do you get that that transition and get people talking?
Yeah, how do you ETL that? How do you get an extract, transform, load process going between those?
Exactly. And that's where again, this is where, Gene and Jeffrey Moore and Mary Kay and Mick and their concepts and ideas, going back to the fundamental principles of Agile and the 6 core values of DevOps. If you think about it from a principles based, that's where, we sort of, my personal opinion on Agile is that we made it we processized it, right? And everybody thinks of Agile as a process.
And we toolified DevOps. We processified Agile and we toolified DevOps. Sorry to interrupt, right?
No. That's perfect. And that's exactly what we've done. And really, if you go back to those core principles, and if you look at the most succeeding companies in industry today that are able to morph and not be as disrupted as much as the others, or handle the disruption coming at us or coming at all of us and them, they can internalize that because of the fact that they're going off a principles approach, not the process or tools approach.
Yeah. And I know I'll have to give it to Jim in a minute here. I got like 5 analogies I want to jam in, but this is why I like having this conversation with you in your talk. I almost, I do think oftentimes it's leadership. You look at an organization trying to get somewhere as a car, right? And, you got a nice modern car with a cushy interior, but you got wheels, tires, brakes, engines, a feedback panel that if you want to get somewhere fast, you got to recognize that if the rest of the car is not fit, is not tuned up, and not aligned with going where you're going, you're probably not going to make it. So yeah, I love that as a starting step. You almost look at the golden circle, the how, what, and why, right? And I think without the why, your principles, it sounds like it's hard to start that sequence.
Absolutely. And the key here is on the leadership. And I'm keeping an eye on the clock here, is that, the key thing we found about leadership is, you've heard this concept, micro learning, and everybody is consuming now and trying to get their learning in the moment and with bite-sized chunks. Well, what about leadership? Can you lead in the moment? And that's why we wrote the book. And that's what we go through in the book is we give you the tools and methods and process for how to lead in the moment, providing the organization what it needs so that you can hold all that stuff together, the brakes and keep the engine and the dashboard and all that, driving the car and keeping all that stuff together because you're bouncing back and forth every few minutes. You have a different leadership, opportunity. So can you meet that moment? And what we found is that we from a metric perspective, everybody's like, well, what about the metrics? How do we measure that? It's really simple, simple. Today, did you as a leader, if you stack up all your 20 leadership moments from the day, were you able to lead in the moment in a positive way better than yesterday? So out of 20 leadership moments today, was able to lead positive in 9 of them. And I learned or had a lesson learned or something in 11 of them. The next day, did I make it to 10? Did I make it to 11? Did I make it to 12? And what we found is that when leaders are looking at those leadership moments and start stacking up their scores, it's really simple. The organizations where the leaders are 50% or more in their leadership moments throughout the day, those teams and the organizations are succeeding. They're succeeding. It's that simple, but it's that hard.
Yeah, I love this conversation. I think we probably need to schedule a part 2 with you, John, because I think this can go on for a long time. But most of the time we talk about digital transformation with our groups at NADOG events, everyone agrees you got to start with the culture, or else it's not going to work. But yeah, I think there's this stage before that is it's got to be led by leadership, right? The culture, none of it's going to work unless leadership is on board and driving. And I do want to ask you a little bit more about leadership, but before we get into that, I remember as well at the Raleigh event, you spoke about a specific progression or sequence for this as well. Can you talk about that or share that sequence with everybody?
Yeah, and I think that ties into really what we're saying here, right? So earlier in the call in this podcast, Brian, you were saying it's all about process. You mentioned a couple things there, and you said it, and that's comes from Gardner and some of these other industry experts and everything. They talk about the process tools, and I forgot the slang that you used or the jargon you used there.
People, process, tools, maybe I said.
Okay, you just
golden circle, how, what, why, right? But,
okay, got it. So what we've done is we've expanded upon that, and this goes back into DASA, and it goes into the other stuff when we really start digging in across the world and these standards and stuff. We realized that we got to expand upon that. So the progression or sequence that you have to follow is culture and mindset up top, then it's the people, then it's the data, and then it's process, then it's tool. Now I get a lot of arguments with customers. Well, process needs to come before data. You know what? If you want to switch or swap data and process, I'm fine. We're not going to argue about it. You do you, whatever works for you and yours, that's awesome. But you can't mix up any of the others. The only 2 you can switch around in the sequence is process and data. But the real simple way to think about it is you have to have the culture and mindset established to attract and retain the like-minded and the right-minded people for you to be able to flow data to your customer and be able to operate and think in a way of flow. Then once you have the people in place, you say, okay, how are you going to flow value to your customer? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to need this data. Okay, great. What do you need about that data? Okay, and what processes are you going to use to process with that data to flow value? And then once those 2 are figured out, now you go to tools and say, okay, here's my requirements for the tool set. And what you're doing is you're taking your architecture, your organizational architecture. If you think about this, is culture, mindset, and people make up your organizational architecture. And then you have your data process tools, which is your enterprise architecture. And I'm curious if you probably never heard it. I haven't heard anybody talk about this stuff, but recently, but us, which is your organizational architecture and this enterprise architecture. You got to align them, and you got to think at the core leadership, at the senior leadership level, even in the mid-level leadership. Everybody has to understand our organizational architecture and enterprise architecture. That has to be aligned to around flowing data, which again is why I picked Mick Kirson's book as number 1. If I had to pick one, because that concept of flowing data around your organizational enterprise architecture, that's the key. And most organizations fail because they start out with process and tools and they don't understand what we just talked about here.
I think it's interesting that, oftentimes you're either in an engineering organization, a technical organization, so your natural inclination to solve a problem is to lean towards the domain that I'm expert in. Let me design systems. Let me put together project plans that say how people are going to operate. I think there's an interesting thing there, just to quickly say that is that I always like to say one of the first things you need to do is, and this goes to the principles, is where are we going? Right. But to figure out how to get there, you need to say, where are we? And I see you as saying data on multiple planes. One is this is information technology. When we're delivering, ultimately, we are delivering, I'd say in a form sort of bits and bytes. But I also see you as saying data is, okay, you asked about metrics. Well, let's get the data. What do we do today? How well do we do it? Would you say that that's correct, that it's important to figure out where you're at to plot where you're going to go?
Yeah, and the thing is, there's no right or wrong here. That's the biggest thing, and that's one of the conversations we had. Again, I just the last, if I think about the last few months with clients, it's everybody wants to know, they're really hyper focused on metrics right now just because of all the disruption. And we said, hey, the bottom line is you're switching so much, you're changing so much at once. Just whatever works for you, it works. And that's the whole thing. Is I've had different clients use different types of measurements in different ways. And, start with the core, the common, metrics that we use when developing our software. Start there to get a handle and get everybody understood. But once you start figuring things out for yourself, don't be afraid to experiment and come up with your own stuff. Because it's about you flowing that value, and everybody, because every organization is different. And let me share this one story real quick with you. So what was really interesting was we had one of our brilliant engineers, most brilliant, is a 90,000 employee company. I was leading this team, this prototyping team, and we had this really smart guy, brain, mind. And I'll date myself here, but Jonathan Schwartz, CEO of Sun, flew me and this engineer out to his shop, and he goes, "Hey, John," he goes, "What?" And he pulled me off to the side, and he goes, "Oh, how did you do it?" And I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. What did I do? What did I do?" Right? And he goes, "No, you got this brilliant technical mind to understand what my vision, and I can't even get my own people to do that. So what in the heck are you doing that and then I was like, whew, okay, I'm not in trouble. It's actually a good thing. And that's really what, to me, is even the most technical, brilliant minds. And that's what Jonathan Short said to Dan about Dan, is he goes, Dan is the most brilliant mind on containers on the planet right now. And from that, he said, what you're doing with that technical mind and having them think in this way. And then within a year, Dan became one of the top recipients of the engineering awards, technical awards, for that 90,000 company, which is mostly engineers. He was in the top 100 of that corporation because of how we had fused the way to flow with how his technology prowess was able to work with customers. And then now all of a sudden you had all the executives from all over the world trying to grab Dan's time to pull him on the front line, to put him in front of the customer, which a year ago they put him in the closet and said, "You can't speak to anybody because nobody understands you, and you're an IT guy. We don't want you out there in front of the customer."
Great story. Hilarious. I mean, inspiring, but also funny when you talk about getting the engineer out of the closet. But
right.
Yeah.
I know that we're a couple minutes past our scheduled time here,
Yep.
and I do want to get to the Q&A. If you're still with us, please, just hang out for a few minutes. I got one more question here, and then we're going to jump into the Q&A. And I want to talk a little bit more about leadership, but I also want to talk about, well, one, like if I'm a leader that's working for an organization that's just getting started in my transformation. One, what bit of advice, if you have any kind of nugget, or you could to give them any one type of advice as they venture out and begin that, and also talk about the failure rate of these kinds of transformations as well, because I know a lot of these, I don't know what the numbers are, the statistics are, but a lot of them do fail, right? People fail and have to reset and start again and stuff. So are there any specific things that you could offer to either the leader or the team itself to as they're getting started to help avoid some of those failures?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's do it. So the easier part is, let's hit the easier one first, which is the failure rates. So really quickly, 70 to 94% of our adoptions of Agile, DevOps, and digital transformations fail, depending upon the source. And if you look at when they fail, which is really interesting, is 42% fail when they go to scale. So that means is they've been successful in a prototype, they've been successful with a small team, but when they go to scale across the organization, they fail. And that's because of the culture clash, because you can't think and do. And I don't even like the words agile and DevOps anymore. I call it dynamic thinking and doing dynamically. And so this is where the recommendation for folks out there that are struggling with all this, and basically to me, it's going to be on the hand. I'm going to focus on the hands, start with the hands-on teams. If you're the scrum master, if you're the product owner, if you're the engineer, everybody's a leader. So I just want to set that everybody's a leader in their mindset because you're leading your efforts on what you're doing. The key here is that you got to set your context. Your team has to be about flowing value, getting as close to the customer as you can, getting that customer, pull them in with you if you can. And that's the key, is getting that flow, figure out the flow with the client, flowing of information, the 3 ways of the Phoenix project, back and forth, closing those feet. It's all about feedback loops, being iterative. So how do you the guys and gals set themselves up so they can be very iterative, very small chunks? And that's the mindset going in. Now, the challenge with that is now you're going to have to, in most chances, that's a subculture now you're creating. So now you're going to have to go to that mid-level leadership, and now you're going to have to go to the senior leadership, and you're going to have to get stakeholders and buy-in above you to give you top cover, because you will be thinking and doing differently. You are going to run into people and, some challenges there. So go find, formally or informally, go find the people that are going to support you, have the conversations, get yourself some top cover, and start there. Now, one biggest thing that I see out there today, and I won't mention the company's name, but we all see their commercials on a daily basis on the TV, and their transformation has been going on for over 9 years. I've been tracking it. I've been in communication with since day one. In their way they've organized, they incentivize their product owners that they would lose thousands of dollars, multiple thousands of dollars, if they were to work Agile and DevOps. And so the whole incentive system is, in today, especially in today's economy, who's going to give up thousands, multiple thousands of dollars, to be a team player, to do what we should be doing when they're incentivized not to. So that's the biggest challenge I see, is the HR policies and some of the organizational policies. Goes back to why I said the organizational architecture has to be aligned with the enterprise architecture, and that has to be worked out. If you're in the trenches and you're doing that work and you run into those things, flag it, send it up the flagpole, get it up to the higher management, and put your projects to red, put your market red, get visibility to it. It's going to take time. I understand that. Be patient with your leaders, because for leaders to change this, now they have to go through the whole dynamics, and it's patience. And I guess the key thing I would leave everybody with is we're so used to being results fast. I need it now. And the reality is that these transformations and everything we've talked about here, it's going to take you months, if not years, to transform and get all this stuff worked out, and do it in a way that you're just, again, positive to one another and focus on flowing value. And if you do that, that to me is the warm knife through butter, because it's less conflictive. If somebody is not on board with flowing value, why is it? Most times it's because they're personal gain, personal motive, personal whatever value belief set, they're not, whatever that is, then now you can address it, and their behaviors and thought process will marginalize themselves. You don't have to do the hard, they're doing. So anyways, those folks are identified.
Yeah. I first of all, you and I were on an email thread, so you and I are probably just going to have to carve out a couple hours to talk, because I want to get in with you. You're really bringing back, it's been a couple of years since I was going out to clients, right, and helping them transform. But I did enough of it that I can tell the audience here that John has this stuff down. He has an amazing way of being able to communicate it, right? There's a lot I'd love to say. When you say patience, just think of how long it takes to actually build the skyscraper as opposed to tear a skyscraper down. So understand that progress takes time. You know what? I'm just going to give a really quick summary and hand it to Jim so we can get into questions and answers, because you've said things so well. Thank you, John. And I'd summarize for the audience here that really, acknowledge that when you have to go through a transformation, it's more than just tools and a rigid process. One is you need to be pragmatic about it. but two is it is really about the people and culture, and the people and culture start with leadership. So leaders on this call, you got to engage thoughtfully and communicate well around your practice. People here who are individual contributors or managers, recognize, think outside of process and tools, engage your higher ups, engage your leaders. John, thank you for the book references. Thank you for the fantastic guidance and wisdom. Hopefully we'll get to talk more to you about this. And with this, I'll send it over to Jim over there on location.
Cool. Right. I need to get like an on location video behind
you
me.
You need to be standing in a flood with water up to your waist. And
there you go. Perfect. Well, we are going to move into the Q&A. So for everyone who's here with us live, stick around. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone who's watching on YouTube. For everyone on YouTube, if you would like to participate in the Q&A of any of these, just make sure you're here, obviously, for the live sessions. We stay on for another 15 or 20 minutes and answer. We'll get through every question that we have. We've got a bunch. So please stick on for that. With that, John, thank you very, very much. Awesome to talk with you again, and very much looking forward to seeing you again in Raleigh in a few months. And thank you, Digital AI and Encore, for coming on and providing the level up session at the beginning of this one. Really appreciate you guys. Looking forward to seeing you guys. I know you guys are sponsoring some events coming up in the second half as well. With that, thank you everyone for being on. Thank you for watching. Make sure you join NADOG. It's nadog.com/join, and you'll get invitations to not just webinars, but all of the local live events as well.
Yes, drop knowledge, pure delight. DevOps chatter, turn the volume high. Brian and Jim bringing summer vibes.